All right, so let's see. So this is the plan. We're going to do a dust off your SEO strategy talk right now. It's packed full of information. I hope I can get through this in time. If not, I can stay late and I'll make this PowerPoint available to you offline. So let's see. So my name is Stephen. I run a small digital marketing agency. It's myself at the moment. It's some kind of offshore contractors, but really I do most of the work. You can reach me at sfraga@gmail.com. The name of my agency is shouthouse.com. You can go there if you want, but this is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I also answer the phone. I also run 3 of the San Francisco largest digital marketing meetup groups. You can join the meetup group if you want. There's the URL. Let's see. All right, let's just dive right into it. So if you have questions, just please put them in the chat box and I'll answer them. And Carly, if I miss one, because it's on a different screen for me, just let me know. So we have the main areas of SEO. And so the kind of dust off your SEO strategy, it kind of implies that you already know something about SEO, just the basics. We're going to kind of dive into some of the, not more advanced, but more current techniques and just kind of review the basics as well. So the main areas of SEO, 3 of them really. There's one which I left off, which is keyword research, but let's assume you've already figured out the keywords that you want to target, whether it's your product or your specialty of some sort. The 3 main areas of SEO are on-page, off-page, and technical. So on-page, you might guess, are things that you can do on your website, on your pages, that can change your SEO potency. Off-page are things you would do on other people's websites if you can get that to happen somehow, like building links and social shares and stuff like that. And then the part that's a little bit less commonly known about is technical SEO. A lot of it relates to making sure that your site serves your pages pretty quickly, because that's a huge ranking factor. But there's some other stuff there as well, and some complicated code that you can get into. So it can definitely get very complicated. And then pretty quickly you'll realize that I put memes throughout this whole presentation. So hopefully you'll start to recognize some of them. I got them all from this website called Meme Generator. All right, so let's see. On-page SEO is the first part. I've got a little, if you forget where you are, I've got a little kind of breadcrumb going on with this on-page thing. You'll see where things are up here in the corner there. So in terms of on-page SEO, there's a couple things you can affect. There's HTML, just kind of the source code of your web page. The actual content, which really means the writing in some of the images on the web page. And then in terms of your website and the page in particular, something called EAT, which is an acronym for expertise, authority, and trust, which is a big, big thing that Google's all about. You know, is your web page an expert? Are you, as the author of the web page, an expert? Is your website an authority? Is it trusted? And then UI UX, which is user experience, really more user experience. You know, do people get lost in your menus, and do they have a good experience on your website? And then strangely, there's a couple things you would imagine. Compliance. There's certain standards and things you should have, like refund policies and privacy policies and terms and conditions, and valid HTML that make a difference. Right, let's see. Okay, so the first one is HTML. So there's an impact that HTML on your web page has on what are called SERPs and CTRs. So SERPs, you may know this as an SEO term, search engine results pages. It's basically the page that you get after you type in a search into Google. So you'll see that term all the time, your SERP. And then CTR, which is click-through rate. So if you have a listing on page 1 of Google's SERP results page, and somebody clicks on it, that affects their click-through rate. You know, if 10 people see your link and one of them clicks through it, then you have a 10% click-through rate. So your HTML on a particular web page can affect the click-through rate and how the SERP is displayed. All right, so here I'm going to try to get into actually showing you some stuff. Hopefully this is where things will go wrong, but hopefully it won't. But I'm going to try going back and forth from a browser to the presentation to kind of show you some stuff about how this works. So starting with this first bullet, there are lots of SERP preview tools to try out what your title and meta tags look like. So let me show you one of them, and I'll go back and forth with a browser here. Hold on. You have to type this in, I can't copy. So there is a browser tool called Portent.com SERP Preview Tool. So when you search for something, like let's say for sports shoes, you'll see these below the ads, you'll see these listings. And you'll notice that for some of these listings, the title gets kind of cut off. Apparently not on this page, but you'll see them. You'll see 3 dots at the end of this. That's because they made their title too long. If I search for the attorneys, see these 3 dots? This is a case where they made their title too long. This is another one where there's 3 dots, and this doesn't quite look like English, right? It's it's not like a sentence. This is something that Google actually scraped from their website and kind of served up instead of the meta description that they're hoping it would get. So in this case, Google did both change the title and they also changed the description that shows up. So you want to try to avoid that, and to do that you have these SERP preview tools. So you can actually say, hey, for a particular browser or even a cell phone, what would it look like if my title were, red shoes, sizes? And then you can throw in a description, these are the best shoes. And it'll tell you how many characters you have to go. There's a certain kind of size before Google starts truncating and messing with your descriptions. Google changes about 65% of the descriptions and a fair percentage of the titles, certainly if they're too long. So for titles, you kind of have like about 55 to 60 characters, but it's really measured in pixels. It's like a letter I is actually thinner than a letter E. So you would end up with more room if you had a whole bunch of thin characters in your title. So these are the kind of things you play with in order to get the best title that's the least likely to get rewritten by Google. So the title and the HTML and the meta description tags are what determine what ends up in that SERP kind of little bar that presents your web page. There's another part of your HTML that seems to be getting more popular, which is what are called fraggles. So these are fragments and handles together. Kind of sounds like my last name, Praga. But the idea is that on a particular web page, you have these tags that are called anchor tags, where you'd say the anchor's the name is dogs, and you put a pound sign in front of it. And it allows you to jump down from the top of the page to some part of the page. If you have a pet store, you might have a section on dogs, and below it a section on cats, and above that parrots. And you want people to be able to jump directly down to dogs. So these are actually starting to show up in the search engine results pages. So to give you an example, if I search for Fin. So here's a Wikipedia entry for it. And you see there's actually links inside the SERP right here. So if you look at the link and you look down here in this taskbar area, you'll see a little pound sign. And you'll see that it jumps, maybe not that one. I think it's being cut off, but it does jump down. So if I click on one of those, well, that didn't work. Whoopsies. Well, it's supposed to jump down. I think I'm looking for the text. I clicked on the wrong one. It's not the Wikipedia page. It is the actual text, like of the Huckleberry book. So if I click on that one, you see the little pound sign down in this area. So if I click on Tom Sawyer's Band, it jumps halfway down the page. So that's kind of a new technique. People are trying to get extra real estate with these SERPs and having more links, more sections within their SERP, kind of more real estate basically. And then you also have control over the file names and the URL, which create the URLs. So a lot of people do this. They'll have a keyword that they optimize for on a particular web page, whether it's red shoes or liability lawyers or whatever. But then they'll use the synonyms for that, like liability attorneys or dark pink shoes. And they'll put that in the URL. So they kind of get both the keyword in their title and a synonym in the URL, and it's more compelling for people when they look at it. Another current trend is what are called people also asks, PAAs. So when I was looking at that a second ago, is it still here? I think it was further up on the page. So people also ask. So Google here has scraped the web and figured out, or based on its database of searches, it's figured out that people have asked these questions a lot. They search for them. And what's happening is that website owners are starting to try to target these questions and provide an answer. So like this one, why is Huckleberry Finn banned? Somewhere in this web page, it answers that question. And it might have like an H1 tag that starts it off with the question, why is Huckleberry Finn banned? And then Google picked that up, saw that this website was an authority, and then used that, the next paragraph, in order to answer the question of why is Huckleberry Finn banned. Here's another example. If I search for potatoes, you see these people also ask. And if you click on one, you actually end up with more questions. It creates more of them depending on which one you click on. So is potato better than rice? Suddenly there's more questions about potatoes relating to health and nutrition. And let's see if they actually answer this. Is potato better than rice on this page? Well, it's definitely about potatoes versus rice. So they're kind of targeting that, which is better. You also see a lot of these lists, which are UL lists in HTML. And whenever they're ordered, like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's also kind of a common signal to Google that it's good for scraping to put in the people also ask section. Like if someone says, how do I do this? The typical answer is, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And so if you have an ordered list on your page that answers that question right after an H1 tag that asks that question, then it's more likely to end up in the people also ask section, which gets a lot of screen real estate here. All right. All right, so more about HTML. You control the links that are on your web page, so-called internal links, and they help you define your site structure. So here's some examples of site structure. This is kind of funny. You have like Amazon where it's all nicely organized. Google's kind of a mess. And then there's Apple. It's hard to tell, but I guess Steve Jobs is kind of in the middle. And these are really organizational diagrams more than link diagrams. But I guess Steve Jobs micromanages every now and then. You'll see a spoke that goes right from the center all the way up to the end where he's talking to some dude. And in Oracle, you have like their legal department versus everything else, and Microsoft, etc. If you get this PowerPoint, you'll see the expanded version. You actually see it's much funnier. You can see more detail. So the site structure is important for a couple reasons. It tells Google kind of how to organize your website, which pages are important, which pages are the product pages. And if your website kind of looks like this, which is the ideal scenario, you want each one of these bottom things to become a product page that's unique and the target of a potential search. So to help do that, typically people have breadcrumbs. So these are the kind of tags, these links at the top of a web page that tell users where they are. So you've heard the term landing page. When people search for something, they click on a result in Google, and they land somewhere in the middle of your website. So they kind of like parachute in. They don't really know where they are. They just see the they're in one of these bottom nodes here. So they need to figure out where things are. Maybe they're interested in a different node in the same category. So they need to be able to go up a level, kind of like a category page, maybe up to a siloed page, and then a super category page. So they can see all the various products and all the various categories. So breadcrumbs help do that, and they kind of create a certain number of links where the higher up in the hierarchy something is, the more links it gets because of the nature of the breadcrumbs. Just like we have breadcrumbs in this presentation up here. If you look through the presentation, you'll see 20 or 10 of these on-page links, let's say, and maybe 3 of these HTML kind of subcategories. So the fact that this is a super category and it shows up on multiple pages, and if it were linked, would mean that there'd be a lot more SEO juice going to that kind of category page. The other thing that you control, if you're in control of the HTML on your page, is the anchor text. If you have an Ahref tag, you can choose what you want to be clickable, what words you want to be clickable. So you can put your product terms like red shoes or liability case studies or whatever it is inside the anchor text, which is much harder to do if you're trying to get someone else to link to your website where you can't necessarily kind of get them to do exactly what you want. You can also kind of sculpt the page rank, which is kind of like the potency of each page, by having a certain number of links to each one. If you look at this diagram, they're pretty evenly spread out, but you could have a whole bunch of links pointing to a particular page. Now, back in the day, it used to be that people would have a ton of links on one page to their favorite internal page. And then Google set up what's called the first link priority rule, where if you have a ton of internal links on a page, Google will only really consider the first one if there are multiple ones go to the same page. So you gotta watch out for that. All right, let me move to the next one. All right, so the other thing that you control in the HTML are the headings. So headings are H1 and H2 tags, and they kind of stand for the big bold sentences that precede the paragraphs of text. So each page in an ideal world should have one H1 and then multiple H2s underneath it. And then if you really have a lot of detail, a really long page or kind of messy page, you might have H3s, but usually not more than that. And then you shouldn't confuse the title of the web page, the title tag, versus the headings, the H1s and H2s. So the title tag is what shows up on Google SERPs, and you want that to be as compelling as possible. You know, an example would be, can I deduct cat food from my taxes? You know, you're paying for your cat's food and you wonder, can you deduct it from your adjusted gross income? So that's a nice juicy click-through title that Google would probably present. And if you have a better click-through rate, Google tends to move your result up in the rankings. So you definitely want a high click-through, and you want juicy titles like that. But the reality is, when you get to the web page, people are already on the website. They're surfing, they're clicking around on your site. It might be more accurate to describe this, particular thing instead of, can I deduct cat food on my taxes? It's more like dependent care deductions in section 185B or something like that, where they're already on your website. At that point, you don't really care about the signal to Google that they click through anymore. You want to give them something that's a little bit more informational. So that's why we have this mean. This heading is not the title you're looking for. And then you control the headings, the H1s, so you might as well put the keywords that you're targeting in those headings, whether it's red shoes or liability attorneys or whatever. All right, so here's a big topic in SEO now, which is what's called dwell time. And this relates to your content. It's kind of what it sounds like. How much time did somebody dwell on your web page? The more time, the better. So how would Google measure this? Well, it's kind of hard for them to do it because once your web visitor goes to your website, Google can't really tell what's going on at that point. It's private between you and the visitor, or your website and the visitor. The only way it can tell is if the visitor goes back to Google and looks for something else. So you have an incentive to have them dwell and stay on your website as long as possible. Because if they bounce right back to Google, it means they didn't really find what they wanted, which is kind of a bad signal. That's called pogo sticking, where somebody clicks on a web page and then immediately regrets it and goes back to Google and clicks on another result. So a lot of webmasters are asking themselves what would make it so that people spend a lot of time on your website. And they're kind of gaming the system. They're creating long articles with 1,000 words, 1,500 words, which kind of correlates with authority as well, though, and expertise. You can only write so much about a thing unless you know about it. But it keeps people reading, reducing the bounce rate. And then internal linking means that they can go and find other pages on your site. If you just give them the long article and they're done, then they might bounce back after a little bit to Google. You can also add videos through YouTube or Vimeo to your website, and that definitely increases your dwell time. And it's like a more fun, interactive web page. And then the other part of content, it's not related to dwell time, is keyword density. So it used to be that people would pepper their web pages with keywords and hope that would help them rank. And then people overdid it, and Google started penalizing you for that. So you want to keep your keyword density to about 1%, 2% at most of the number of words in the web page. So if you have 1,000 words, you'd want 10 of them to be the keyword that you're searching for, that you're hoping someone's searching for. A lot of people on Google will actually say that keywords aren't really a factor anymore, but the reality is that everybody does that. There's got to be a reason for it, so I still think it's probably a factor. So here's the big one, the EAT acronym: expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. Now, at first, when you hear this, they all kind of sound the same, right? Expertise and authority, that's almost the same thing. Trustworthiness, why wouldn't you trust an authority, right? So I was confused by that for quite a while. There are some kind of slight differences, though. So let's say you're searching for something that's a little bit more sketchy, like weight loss pills. And you want to this is kind of a transactional search. You don't want necessarily information about them as much as you want to ultimately buy one. Actually, I'm sorry, I guess you do want information. So each one of these results here, like Healthline, WebMD, Medical News Today, Amazon, they all have a certain kind of ranking in terms of expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So expertise is for the most part about the actual page itself. How much data does it give you? Is it cited by other web pages out there? Was it written by an author who's an expert? Kind of stuff like that. The authority is a little bit different. It relates somewhat more to the website itself. Is the website all about weight loss pills? Or Amazon's not necessarily so much of an authority on this. It sells a million different things. Same with these things, Medical News, WebMD. This, I guess, as well. But there might be some, weight loss pill website that would rank pretty well for authority on it. And then trustworthiness, it might not rank so well for trustworthiness, but things like Healthline, WebMD would definitely rank highly for trustworthiness. And it's kind of the obvious stuff, like .gov websites, .edu websites rank well for trustworthiness. Things that have, if it's like Amazon has a clear refund policy, they have kind of a privacy policy, they have terms and conditions on their website. They have an easy way to contact them with a phone number. They have, in the case of like these other things like Healthline and WebMD, they probably have other links to authorities or experts in the industry for that topic. So all that conveys a certain trustworthiness. Reviews of a particular shop if it was a product. So those are the things you should be shooting for. When you write a page or some kind of content, you want to become the expert. If you can, you want your website to be the authority on this, and you yourself to be the authority. Example would be Dr. Fauci is kind of an authority, but there's definitely lots of other experts about the COVID thing. Trustworthiness, the CDC is the most trustworthy. Amazon selling, COVID supplements is not as trustworthy. All right, let's see. So the next one is user experience. That's basically how do people react to your website? Do they have a good time on it? Do they find what they're looking for? Or do they bounce back? And a lot of these relate to just bouncing back and, that signal to Google. So does it have a logical navigational structure like that pyramid diagram I showed you earlier? Does it have annoying intrusive interstitials, pop-ups? That's what this comic is about. Is it mobile friendly? That's a big one. And does it serve the web pages quickly? And then a big one is, does it answer the intent of the searcher? You know, there's different kinds of searches: informational, like I'm researching something; transactional, like I want to buy something. And you have a different page depending on whether someone wants to buy something or someone wants to find out about something. That's why listicles like 12 reasons such and such, or the 13 best so-and-sos, those are super popular because they answer the search intent, which is usually informational research. And then a good design also keeps people from bouncing back, and it increases the dwell time that they stay on your website. For mobile friendliness, Google has a tool, which I can show you in a second. Called the Google Mobile Friendliness Test. And you can actually type in a website here and see what it says about mobile friendliness. Find a good one. So I've been using this one for this thing, which is a Wikipedia page. A little creature called a tardigrade. I'll use this in a couple examples. So this is the page. These are these like indestructible, tiny, microscopic creatures that can live out in space or at the bottom of the ocean or in cubes of ice. So if I plug that in here and test it, Google will tell me pretty quickly whether or not it's mobile friendly. And that means that it's responsive. If I shrink the screen size, then I will get like I don't have to pinch it to zoom in and see what's going on. So it says it's mobile friendly, gives me a little preview, and that's kind of a standard test. Right. All right, so next topic in on-page optimization is compliance. So you're in control of all this stuff, so you can make it compliant with all the various things that Google's looking for. So here's an easy one, valid HTML. You can check for valid HTML with this thing right here. I'll do it right now. So looking for that, paste my URL. Just thinking, yeah, it's got some issues. Actually, it's kind of got a lot of issues. It looks like there are a lot of the same ones, though, link elements. So it'd be an easy fix, but that's definitely a ranking signal to Google. It's part of user experience. You know, is your web page going to show up correctly on all the browsers, and is it what you expected, considering you have broken HTML? So another one is accessibility, meaning, you know, can people that are visually impaired or deaf or, you know, have some other impairment that keeps them from getting the full experience of your website, can they actually access it as much as possible? So there are tools for this. There's one tool in Chrome that I'll be surprised if I get this to work correctly because it's kind of a tricky one. But it's currently considered not a ranking factor, but it's quite predictable that it will become a ranking factor. All right, so here is, this actually isn't Chrome. This is a different browser called Brave. But I'll start Chrome up. There's a tool within Chrome that does let you see a little bit of accessibility. So here's Chrome. I'm going to get that tardigrades thing up again. And the tool is called the HTML inspector. I think that's what it's called. But if you just right-click somewhere in a white area and hit inspect or Control-Shift-I, you'll see a whole other web page, which may show up on a different screen. But I'll drag it over here. It looks like this. You get all this stuff where you can kind of see what's going on the web page based on the source code. But there's a couple other things that are useful here. So one is, and it's hard to display with just one screen. One is whether or not it shows up on a mobile screen correctly. So this is the device toolbar. There's a little bit of digression here, but if I click on that, I can actually shrink the size of the screen to pretend like it's a mobile thing and see how it reacts to it. So this is not good because you need to squeeze it. It's not really responsive. But you can actually choose which kind of mobile device you want to simulate. Like there's an iPad. What size? That part's irrelevant. It's more like what portion of the screen do you want this to take up. But what I was getting into was there's a way to use this tool to check the accessibility of a particular page. And it's this thing right here called Lighthouse. And it doesn't work for me too often, but I'll click Generate Report. It's going to start crunching the numbers, trying to warm up and figure this out. And there we go, it worked this time. All right. So it's got various scales, and one of them is accessibility. So if I click on that, it kind of zooms down to the bottom here, but you can go through it and see all the various things. Here's accessibility. It'll tell you various issues, like the buttons aren't labeled, form fields aren't labeled, like there's not enough contrast between the text and the background in certain spots, stuff like that. All right. So, so next part of this that you control, and these are pretty easy, are the privacy policy and the terms and conditions. They're tiny ranking signals that tell Google that you're kind of a trustworthy website. You went to the trouble of putting together a privacy policy and terms and conditions. And there's places where you can actually create these privacy policies if you don't mind just taking a moment to do it. Let me just get this going. So privacy policy, let's see, there's one called terms feed. You can just look up privacy policy generator, but let's see if I can find the one. There are lots of, here's the one I was using, free privacy policy generator. And it just kind of creates the legalese for you. You start off with what kind of thing am I working with, and what I want to be my policy. One important part of this, there's the GDPR, the European law about cookies and privacy and all the rest of it. And starting January 1st of this year and starting to get enforced July 1st is the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, which pretty much only affects large companies, with one exception, which is companies that have more than 50,000 user sessions per year, which actually is a lot of companies. And there's various terms that you have to agree with that. That's not a ranking signal, having some kind of compliance for that, but you can imagine all these things are going to end up, as it gets more and more competitive, and Google wants to kind of move people in the direction of proper websites, that they will end up as ranking factors. And then the last one is HTTPS. Most websites are HTTPS by now. They provide that little SSL certificate. And there's actually free SSL certificates now from a group called let'sencrypt.org. But they last for like 3 months, but you can renew them. So otherwise it's kind of a racket. They're like $300, $100, depending on where you go. So your job is to kind of avoid these errors, and there's definitely places where you can kind of fix them one by one. All right, let's see. So the next section is off-page SEO. What can you do off your website in order to increase its rankings? So everyone's heard of link building, and there's techniques for that. Citations are just kind of getting mentions, not necessarily links, in other places, whether it's Yelp or articles in SFGate. Social shares, that's when somebody clicks on that button to share your content. And then a big one is if you have a local business, there's Google My Business, which is kind of like the Yelp for Google, where you set up your business and kind of write in your hours and your products and prices and location. And then reviews, which are Yelp reviews and TripAdvisor and Trustpilot and Better Business Bureau. All right, so the first one is the big one, link building techniques. Every year you hear this thing that link building is dead. But every year people still go after it, and I think it's still probably one of the largest ranking factors. So how do you get other people to link to you? It's $1 million question. You can't you can't control what's on their website. You have various strategies, like you can, twist their arms, you can bribe them, you can fool them. But the best one is just to create some quality content, articles or lists, something that's worthy of getting a link or an infographic. And it used to be that people would hoard their outbound links. They wouldn't have any links on their website that went out to other websites because they felt like they would lose some of their SEO juice. They'd be giving it to someone else. But that's changed not too long ago. Now Google does like to see external links on people's websites. So that makes it much more enticing to people to link to authorities, and you could be that authority. So that's the ideal way, is you create quality content. But that's time consuming. So there's some easier things. You can coerce your suppliers. There are people that are giving you stuff and you're paying them money. And you might ask for a link on their website. I put this below, but you can give them a testimonial if you like their product. And then hopefully they'll post your testimonial and put a link to your website on their website. Without getting spammy, you can list in your industry directories. There's a small number of, authoritative industry directories for each industry. You can interview experts in your field or in your industry. And then what will happen is that those experts will link back to your page where you posted a video of that interview. So it's kind of a win-win scenario. It doesn't take long to interview someone, and they get to kind of humble brag about being interviewed. If you have a nice infographic, that's a good one. And they get into the more difficult ways of getting links. First, look who's linking to your competitors and try and kind of reverse engineer what was the motivation for them to do that. And can you replicate that for your website? If somebody links to your competitor, is there a reason why they wouldn't link to your website? The skyscraper technique, which is basically, find a popular topic that's in your industry and see what people are writing about and linking to, and then take the best web page that exists out there for that particular topic, and then do it 5 times, 10 times better. So everybody looks up at the skyscrapers. Everybody wants to link to the best, the tallest, the longest, the most authoritative article on a particular topic. Moving that technique. So there's lots of orphaned web pages out there, or there's companies that changed their name and rebranded. And there's lots of websites that link to those companies at their old places, at their old URLs. And so those links are broken now. And it's easy to find on Google broken links. There are, you can Google it, but there's ways of searching for stuff like dead link or service no longer active. Wikipedia flags dead links with the word dead link. So you can search for that phrase in your particular product and then find the pages that have broken links that are in your industry. And then what you do is you see what they're linking to, you try to find the original, and then see what it's about. And as long as it's one of, related to one of your products, you write a much better article or product description or something that's much better than what was there before. Then you contact the author of the broken link page and tell them, oh, you have a broken link on your page. Would you mind, here's an article about the same thing, only 10 times better. And, while you're cleaning up your page, you might consider linking to this new one. And then there's still some stuff out there that's a little bit more kind of gray hat, black hat SEO, where you could make a donation to a nonprofit. We were talking about that earlier, and maybe they'll make a link. They'll post a link to you. It could be expensive, but they could be like, thank you so much, and you're one of our premier sponsors, or silver sponsors, or whatever. Here's a tricky one. You can create a scholarship and advertise it to various colleges. And say, okay, I'm going to create a scholarship for the person who can, best diagram or red shoes, or can do an AutoCAD or whatever diagram of one of our products. And that will get posted on college websites, which are .edu websites, which have a lot of authority and trustworthiness. And if it's a scholarship, kind of a competition, then you might get a lot of students who are creating links on their .edu web pages. And then here's a topic which still goes on. It's hard work, but you can guest blog, which means write articles on other people's websites and have as your author thing a little link back to you. All right. So citations are an off-page thing where you basically have, it's like a mention, and it doesn't have to have a link, but a citation would be something like, you know, a listing of your company in the Better Business Bureau, or in an article in the SF Chronicle. And then there are places, standard places, where you should have kind of duplicates of your web brand. It's like Facebook, Yelp, Google My Business, Bing Maps, and Foursquare. So those are citations, and you want to make sure that your name, address, and phone match. It's possible someone, you know, the business that rented your office there before you has a different name, a different business entirely. And Google can get confused by that. So you want to have as many matching map citations as possible. That's fast. And then everyone knows about this, social media shares, and UGC, user-generated content. So social media shares have become more and more important. You know, people put out articles, and it has to be somewhat juicy or, you know, educational, or something that has an incentive for other people to share it. And then this is the first time I'm going to mention this, but there is what's called Schema, which is basically HTML tags that you put in your web page that tell Google a little bit more about the content of the web page. That's kind of like structured, you know, instead of the Google trying to scrape through the words on the web page, trying to figure out what it's about and who wrote it, what's their Facebook profile, what's their Yelp profile. You can actually code that into the HTML and say, this is my Facebook profile, this is my Yelp profile, here's the exact URL. You don't have to figure it out. And you don't necessarily want that to all show up on the web page, but you do want Google to associate you as the author of the page and your brand and kind of put it all together in a cohesive whole. If you're using WordPress, which lots of people do, there's lots of plugins for social sharing. And then for commenting, there's a ton of them. A lot of people use Disqus. I guess that's getting a little bit older now. But there's free ones out there like Jetpack. And then everybody has a Facebook account or Instagram, so you can actually include Facebook as a commenting system, which is good in a way if you want something that's a little bit more trustworthy, because people can't make up fake Facebook accounts as easily as they can Disqus. All right, here's the big one, Google My Business. So especially if you're a local business or you have a service area in, like you're a plumber that serves a certain area, you should set up a Google My Business account. And the idea is that Google wants to display local businesses to people who are searching, especially when they use the words near me, like pizza restaurant near me. So if you do that, you'll see results that kind of look like this. You'll see what's called the local pack, these things, in a map. And all this information, like whether it's open or not, that is taken from their Google My Business account. If I search for one of them by brand name, like Cressida Park Cafe, we'll see a little section on the right here, which is also taken from their Google My Business account. If you want to set up one of these accounts, then you go to business.google.com and you log in, and you know, create your account and set up your hours and everything. Let's see. Let me close some of these guys. So they show up in the local pack or on the side. Google got rid of Google Plus, but this is kind of like the author side of this is you, and then the brand side of this is kind of a competitor to Yelp. Google My Business is kind of like Yelp with all the data that Google already has about you. So there's an SEO strategy associated with Google My Business. You want to post frequently. You want to fill in all the fields that they're asking for, whether it's hours or products and prices, location, the category of the business is really important. You want to be in the same category as your competitors. You want to add photos pretty frequently, and they shouldn't be stock photos. They should be actual real photos that are geotagged, they're current, and that were taken in the area where your business is. And then you should encourage and respond to reviews. So one of Google's terms of service is that it's okay to ask people for reviews, whereas Yelp, it's not okay to ask people for reviews. But the reviews, when you give someone a link to your Google My Business page and it's reviews, they'll fill it out. It'll become part of your Google My Business profile, and then it'll show up when someone does a search for your particular brand name. There's a part of Google My Business which is called Insights, and it'll give you a list of what people search for that pulled up your company. And so what you can do is you kind of say, okay, let's say somebody searched for pizza restaurant near me, or a plumber near me. So you can actually incorporate that into your posts. You could say in one of your posts, like, did you just search for a plumber near me? We can help with that. And there you have like a very close match between what the searcher searched for, plumber near me, and what's inside your blog, your post on Google My Business. So it's going to encourage your business to show up in that local pack. And then sometimes you can do this crazy thing. You can have a business, if you have a business that's actually kind of like a generic term, you might actually win for the brand name and get a huge amount of real estate. So for instance, I know this guy who has a company called Childcare Careers. That's his business. But as a term, it's also something that people search for. So he wins, this is his business, but it actually looks like people are searching for childcare careers. So I don't know if you should name your business Best Pizza Restaurant, but in the short term, you could probably game it that way until Google catches on to it. Here's what Google My Business looks like if you're logged in. So there's your posts, here's your information about your address, when your hours are. This is the insights section I was talking about. These are the reviews. You should always respond to reviews, even negative ones. Keep it positive and respond quickly. I'm not quite sure. I think this is people answering, and these are asking questions and answering, and these are photos. This is a feature where you can Google kind of takes a percentage and lets people book stuff through Google My Business. When you set up a Google My Business, they're worried about spam because it's very valuable to get into this Google local pack. So they actually send you a postcard to verify your address, make sure you're really there. And then if you look, sometimes you'll see on, let's see, on these results here, I guess not in this one, let me find a good one, about Swarovski. Here's Swarovski. If you look down here, okay, well, it's missing on this one. Sometimes you'll see a little kind of histogram of when that particular shop is busy. So you kind of wonder, well, how do they get that data? How do they know when a shop is busy with people in it? And the answer is they must be checking correlating the geolocation of people's Android devices with being in that particular shop. So you don't want to spam this and pretend like you have a lot of locations around the country if your customers are not going to actually show up at those locations. Because there is a lot of Google My Business spam where people pretend to have locations all across the country. And then when someone purchases something from them, they find out that it's only delivered virtually or it's something else entirely. All right. Let's see how we're doing on time. We are going way past on time. All right, so but I'm actually getting through this pretty quick. Carly, what do you think? Should I keep going or should we open it up to questions?
Hey, Stephen. I think it's great. So if we want to keep going, I guess we can pause and take 2 minutes for questions.
Yeah,
and we can also caveat this with that we're recording the session. So if people have a hard stop, we can send them the link to whatever else is covered. I'm not seeing any questions come through though.
Okay.
So feel free to keep. I think we're good to keep going.
I only have a few slides left, so. All right, so reviews, this one's actually very straightforward. You know, everybody loves reviews, and Google is now taking them into consideration. You'll see them when you search for a brand, and Google will even pull in Yelp reviews and Facebook reviews. And then in the future, it might pull in Better Business Bureau and TripAdvisor reviews. All right, so here's the last section, which is technical SEO. A lot of this relates to usability and, you know, validity concerns. Is your website working correctly? And speed is the #1 thing. And the #2 thing is schema, which is the language for describing particular elements of your web page. So for speed, you have the server and the network speed, which is not the most interesting topic, but it definitely affects things. If you use WordPress, it has speed issues because it's kind of a huge resource hog and has a database, it has PHP going, etc. And then probably the #1 mistake on web pages is the images are too big, and there's ways to speed those up. So in terms of server and network speed, there's various tools to measure it. So Google has one called Google Page Speed Insights, but I find the best one to be this one called GT Metrics. I'll show you what that looks like. GT Metrics. So let's see if I have that tardigrade thing. I do here. Okay, so here is the Wikipedia page. It's going to take a moment to test it, and it's going to give me a lot of options on how to improve this. So it's going to tell me, for instance, if certain images are too big, and it'll even offer me compressed versions of the images. It'll tell me if there's a certain bottleneck where the server's taking too long to respond, or maybe there's some JavaScript that's preventing everything from loading until the JavaScript executes. It'll tell me about whether or not I'm caching, I'm using content delivery networks, and all my various images and static files are kept in somewhere where a server doesn't have to go through a bunch of processing to evaluate them and send them back. Let's see. Okay, so it's kind of figured it out now a little bit. It has different features, and here we go. So it has various scores, and this isn't always true, I find. It certainly didn't take us 4.5 seconds to load. Sometimes that's the first time it's loaded. But if you go down here, it'll give you a grade on various things. But it'll give you some options too to fix things. Like if I click on optimize images, it'll say, hey, you could still, even though you got an A, you could still optimize this. Here's a particular web page, an image. Looks like the Marin headlands, and I could see the optimized version. Oh, that's a much smaller version for some reason. I'm not sure what that was about, but maybe there's a tiny image there somewhere. Here's another one. Let's see what this is about. Well, I don't know what that is. I guess these are tiny creatures for the tardigrades. And then it'll even offer solutions to a lot of these things. You know, see the optimized version of a JavaScript file where they took out all the carriage returns and minimized it. So that's a tool to measure the speed. If you want something that comes directly from Google, Google Page Speed Insights does that. It's pretty similar though. And then the things you can improve, almost everybody at this point uses a kind of a virtual private server, like an Amazon web server, or you know, something from a service like Vultr or DreamHost or GoDaddy, where they have their own server. It's kind of virtual, and you can kind of use the slider to increase the amount of RAM and the CPU speed on that server. CPU speed doesn't really tend to get into it too much, but the RAM does. So you can pay for more server RAM, and that has a nice little boost, and it doesn't cost much, and it's super easy to do. You can set up all your static files like CSS and images on caching servers and content delivery networks. So those are networks where if you have like a logo, you might put it up and on a separate website, like Cloudflare is one of them. And when someone surfaces your website, if they're in Texas or if they're in New Orleans, Cloudflare will find the closest version of that particular static asset, and it'll serve it to them, whether they're in New Orleans or Las Vegas, from the closest server. Here's a tricky one. There's a new version of SSL that's faster than the old one. Almost nobody has it, but you gain a small percentage in upgrading to TLS 1.3, and it won't break anything if the browser doesn't have it. It'll just fall back a level to the older version. Same with the HTTP protocol. We're on HTTP protocol number 2 right now, but 3 is available and it's faster. And then a big one is the web server. So most people have Apache or Microsoft IIS. Depending on the kind of web pages you're serving, you might instead prefer Nginx, or if you're doing PHP, you might get a web server that's dedicated to PHP, like serving fast PHP pages, called Lightspeed. If you're using Apache, you have various modules, various ways of executing the PHP. And if you use WordPress, you're using PHP. So this goes in kind of rank from slow to fastest. And this LS API goes with Lightspeed. And then same for WordPress, you can create plugins or get plugins that allow you to cache your files somewhere else. You can also get an AMP plugin, accelerated mobile page, where WordPress will create a version of your page that doesn't have really any JavaScript of note, and Google will give it preference to someone who's searching on a mobile phone because it'll load much faster. And then here's a little tip: don't upload videos to WordPress. Just upload like a link or an iframe that has a YouTube in it, because the videos will take forever to load and download, and it'll be much faster if you use YouTube or Vimeo. And then here's the big one, something you can do about, even if you don't have WordPress, image speed. So a lot of people have huge images on their site and they don't take the time to optimize them. So WordPress has a plugin called Smush It that compresses them as you upload them, creates smaller versions, and also offers lazy loading. So if you have a tall web page and you have a big image at the bottom of it, there's no point loading it until someone actually scrolls down to it. It's better to optimize to kind of prioritize loading everything above the fold. And so Smush It has a feature for lazy loading. In any web page, even if you don't have WordPress, there's an attribute of the image tag called source set, where you can specify like 5 different sources for the same image in different sizes. So you don't have the one huge beautiful image downloaded by a small tiny cell phone that has a data limit on it. So you can provide a source set of 5 different options, one of which is perfect for a mobile phone. And then I don't know if you saw in that GT metrics, but a lot of the complaints are that your static files, like your JPEGs and CSS files, don't have an expiration header. Like they're getting loaded from scratch every time someone goes to the web page. So you can create what's called an htaccess file, which is read by your web server if you have Apache, that says anytime I have a request for a page that ends, or a file that ends in .jpeg or .png, set an expiration for 1 day or 1 month or whatever. And then in terms of image speed, there's also new formats. This one isn't so new, but scalable vector graphics, SVGs. Those are good for logos and icons and stuff you put on a web page. They aren't very big, and if it's something you would see as kind of has curves, something you could create in Illustrator, then it's perfect for an SVG, where you actually put the points of that image, that shape, inside your HTML, and it loads super quickly. And if someone increases or decreases the size, whether it's on a mobile phone or they change the size of the web page, it'll scale appropriately without this rasterization problem, pixelization problem. And then there's also a new format created by Google itself called Quetzal, which is a variation on JPEG. So it's about 35% better compression than JPEG. And even if the browser doesn't support it, it still loads essentially a JPEG image, so it still works. All right, and then the last part of this is about Schema. And Schema is a little bit complicated. That's why it's part of Technical SEO. So it's an XML vocabulary for web pages. So the reason we do this is it's hard for Google to kind of scrape through all the words on a website and figure out what it's about. It makes more sense for you to just tell it what it's about. You could say, well, here's my address, here's our phone number, instead of having Google try to go through and figure out which is your phone number versus someone else's phone numbers. So there's got to be a way of putting that in your web page and without it showing up, because you might not want all that stuff to show up on every single page. And that's what Schema is. And it's described at schema.org. And the way it works is you go there, you figure out what you're looking for, and you kind of type in the values and you insert into your HTML with a JavaScript tag using this format or some HTML tags using this format. So let me show you what that looks like. Schema, oops, not Schwab. Schema.org, there we go. So let's say you're creating an article. You look for the schema for the article. And it gives you all this information about what you can put in there that tells Google exactly what it's about. And at the bottom, they have some examples, which is super helpful. So here's some examples. It'll tell you, well, here's without any schema. And then let's say you wanted to put the schema in your HTML, you would click on microdata. And it's got the same words on there. Like there's John Doe, there's this. There's little tags that mark up the words and that say this is an article, this is the author, etc. Now it's kind of a mess to put all this stuff inside here. It's very hard to control. So an alternative is JSON LD, JavaScript object notation for linked data. And it's basically just JavaScript for that same information but without all the tags. It's much more compact. So that's this. And then here's some popular schemas. So you can describe your web page, your breadcrumbs, describe your organization, your local business, your address, and you know, hours and everything. Each page could have a product schema. If the product could have reviews. If you have an author and an article, you want to pair those up. And the author is a person, so they may have you know, a Facebook or a Twitter account. Event, like today is an event, and there's education events. They have times, the beginning and ending times. They have formats. Images and videos on your web page have certain criteria you can add to them. And then recipes. And you've all seen those recipe searches where you get this extra information if you search for, let's say, a cupcake recipe. So all this stuff is coming from Schema. And there's ways of marking up the schema. And there's tools that help you do it. So if you Google each one of these, they'll tell you how to work. But the first one basically is choose a web page, and you can kind of tell Google, well, this is an author or this is an article, and it'll let you kind of highlight various words, and it'll develop the schema for you that you can then paste into your web page. You can test to see if it worked with these two tools, the Google Structured Data Testing tool and the Rich Results Test. I'll leave you to Google those. And that's it. So here's some resources. If you want to get this presentation afterwards, I will make it available. You can just email me, sfraga@gmail.com. I think Carly could also be able to help with this. And I think we're probably ready for some questions if anybody has any.